You have probably felt it without naming it. The strange pull that visits when the room is quiet. The tension between what your spirit knows and what your body asks for. The private debate that never quite ends. There is a reason those with a higher calling seem to wrestle more intensely here. It is not because you are weaker. It is because you are wanted. In the lives of the chosen, desire is rarely just biology. It is the very current that can build your destiny or buy your distraction. When that current flows in truth, it becomes creative power and steady presence. When it is hijacked by urgency, it becomes a chain, a quick relief that costs clarity, a moment of heat that leaves you colder than before. This is why so many fight in silence. Not out of shame, but because the battlefield is internal and the most decisive victories are too sacred to parade. If you have ever wondered why the struggle feels disproportionate for you, why it returns at the worst times, why guilt lingers long after the impulse fades, breathe. You are not broken. You are being contended for. And the moment you learn to read the pattern, the battle starts changing shape. Let us be honest about the cycle that wears you down. You resolve to stop. You hold the line. Then a small slip becomes a slide. The slide becomes a spiral. And soon the whisper arrives. Maybe you are not who you thought. That whisper is a lie dressed as logic. What is really happening is simpler and far more hopeful. Your life is carrying more voltage than your habits can hold. The answer is not to become stone or to pretend you do not feel. The answer is to reclaim authorship over the current itself. This is the work of transmutation, taking the same energy that once scattered you and giving it a home in purpose. When you do, your mind clears without hardening, your body steadies without numbing, your spirit grows audible again. You do not become colder, you become concentrated. You stop negotiating with impulses and start negotiating with destiny. And in that shift, the shame that kept you small loses its vocabulary. You begin to recognize what was really at stake. Not your worth, but your focus. Not your salvation, but your assignment. I am not here to scold you into silence or to decorate your struggle with pretty words. I am here to hand you a simple, human map for a spiritual war, one you can follow on a tired Tuesday, not just in a heroic moment. We will name what actually fuels the temptation, why it targets those with a larger mandate, how ancient lives prove this conflict is older than any algorithm, and how to turn the very force that once drained you into the fuel that sustains you. If this resonates and you want these quiet, clarifying messages to reach you when you need them most, take 2 seconds now and subscribe. Not for a number on a screen, but as a small vow to keep your focus fed and your spirit supplied. Stay with me. In the next part, we will step beyond vague guilt and into clear vision, opening the first door of this journey, the hidden war around desire, where it begins, how it operates, and why it presses hardest on those who are called to carry more. Before you try to fix yourself with more willpower and less kindness, pause and consider a simpler, truer frame. This is not only a biological reflex to be suppressed, it is a spiritual contest to be understood. In people with a larger mandate, desire rarely arrives as a neutral feeling. It carries voltage. Properly led, that voltage becomes creative power, depth, and focus. Poorly handled, it fragments attention, leaks time, and slowly convinces you to negotiate away the very assignment that makes you dangerous to darkness. That is why the conflict feels louder for you than for others. You are not cursed with weaker discipline. You are being specifically targeted where your strength is born. Picture the pattern as you have lived it. A stray image lingers a second too long. A restless night opens a door. A moment of relief promises to calm the storm. Afterwards, the fog rolls in. Fatigue, confusion, a faint sense of distance from God, a quiet vow to do better next time. Then the next time looks suspiciously like the last time, and guilt begins its sermon. If the enemy cannot stop you in public, he will try to stall you in private. The most efficient way to neutralize a person with calling is not open catastrophe. It is internal erosion, turning your own mind into a noisy hallway where purpose cannot hear itself think. That is why this battle feels like it never quite ends. It is curated to waste your voltage on loops that do not move your life forward. There is also a reason. This pressure targets your most human places. Sexual desire, at its core, is braided with the same energy you use to make, to build, to bless. When it is aligned, it anchors intimacy, strengthens covenant, and expands your capacity for self-gift. When it is hijacked, it impersonates intimacy while slowly taxing your clarity. The moment you start treating it only as a moral failure or only as a chemical itch, you will fight the wrong war with the wrong weapons. You do not need to become numb. You need to become a steward. Stewardship means you stop asking, "How do I kill this part of me?" and start asking, "How do I lead this power so it serves what I was born to do?" This is also why shame has been such a faithful employee of the enemy. Shame narrows the story to your latest slip and deletes the context of a long global conflict. It tells you that your struggle disqualifies you, when in truth it identifies you. People carrying real assignments have always been pressured here, not because they are easy prey, but because they are meaningful targets. The strategy is elegant in its cruelty. Keep you oscillating between temptation and self-accusation until you are too tired to build. Once you see the pattern, the spell weakens. You realize the issue is not your worth but your focus, not your salvation but your stewardship, not your capacity but your method. The hidden war is fought at the gate size. Ears, imagination long before it breaks into action. But the solution is not paranoia. It is presence. Presence begins with honest naming. This is a spiritual assault concentrated on my creative core. Presence continues with small, repeatable moves that restore authorship, not theatrics that impress no one. You return your mornings to quiet so your day inherits peace instead of panic. You give your body simple, consistent work so it remembers strength without demanding spectacle. You choose rooms and conversations that add oxygen instead of dead. None of this will make you perfect, which is wonderful news, because perfection was never the goal. Coherence is. Coherence is what makes your yes mean yes again and your no stop leaking. Understand, too, that the force pushing against you often arrives disguised as harmless repetition. It is persistence, not just intensity, that wears a man down. That is why so many who love God and lead people still trip here. The pressure is subtle, ambient, normal. You do not notice the cost until the bill arrives. Less focus, less joy, less spiritual signal. The moment you read this as sabotage rather than just me being weak, you stop arguing with yourself and start designing for your assignment. Design is kinder than shame and much more effective. It is how you begin to turn a battlefield into a workshop. You are not alone, and you are not late. You are early to a truer strategy. From now on, measure progress not by the last flare-up, but by the growing intervals of clarity, the cleaner choices made sooner, the quicker returns when you do stumble. That is what winning looks like in a war designed to keep you busy rather than fruitful. It will feel quieter than you expected and more human than you were told, which is exactly why it works. If you have ever wondered why a single moment can redirect years of devotion, David will not flatter you. He was not a lightweight. He was a poet warrior, a king who knew God's voice, a man whose courage steadied a nation. Yet one evening of unguarded gaze became a chain of decisions that darkened his house and cracked his clarity. The tragedy was not that he felt desire. The tragedy was that he stopped leading it. What began as a glance matured into secrecy, then into damage control, and finally into a desperate attempt to bury consequence. After the heat faded, the bill arrived, a heavy spirit, a splintered family, an intimacy with God that felt farther away than it had in years. That is the pattern. Shame hopes you never name impulse becomes entanglement. Entanglement becomes isolation. Isolation becomes story. But notice what breaks the spell. David refused to defend himself to himself. He told the truth, not to perform sorrow, but to reopen the line where grace could reach him. He did not become a smaller man after repentance. He became a clearer one. His authority did not return because he earned it back. It returned because humility made room for it again. Samson's fall is slower and, in some ways, more familiar to the age of constant pain. He was consecrated from birth, endowed with strength so unusual it bordered on myth, and sent to protect his people. His undoing was not a single catastrophic night. It was the daily erosion of boundaries by persistent charm. He traded discernment for flattery, covenant for chemistry, calling for a conversation he believed he could manage. Day after day, pressure disguised as affection asked for a little more access, a little more information, a little more of the secret that underwrote his life. When he finally surrendered the core of his strength, the enemy did not kill him. They blinded him. That is the map of many modern defeats. When desire is permitted to interrogate your identity, the first thing you lose is sight of who you are, of where you are going, of why you were entrusted with power in the first place. And yet, even in chains, hair grows. Even in consequence, God hides a hinge. Samson discovered that repentance is not nostalgia for innocence. It is consent to begin again with what remains. From that consent came one last act of alignment that accomplished in a moment what years of drift had threatened to waste. These stories do not exist to humiliate you. They exist to break the lie that your struggle disqualifies you from usefulness. Both men show the same paradox. The battlefield is intimate, the stakes are public, and the way back is brutally simple truth over performance, alignment over image, obedience over optics. Desire is not the villain. Rashness and erosion are. David teaches the danger of the sudden yes. Samson exposes the danger of the slow leak. One warns you to guard your windows. The other urges you to guard your pace. Together they insist on the same hope. Authority is not lost forever because you stumbled. It is forfeited only when you refuse to be led. Bring this home. The enemy does not need to destroy your gift if he can dull your vision. He does not need to remove your calling if he can convince you to spend it on distractions that feel like intimacy, but purchase only regret. Your way forward will never be built from self-hatred. It will be built from the same materials that rebuilt them. Confession that names what happened without theatrics. Boundaries that honor what matters without self-contempt. And a quiet return to the practices that let your spirit lead your body instead of your body dictating your life. The proof that grace is present is not a sudden immunity to temptation. It is the return of sight, the recovery of weight in your words, the slow, steady capacity to choose sooner and return faster. I'll hold this frame as we move on. If David and Samson map the edges of the field, what happens inside the field is subtler, an invisible cycle that turns a single compromise into a season. To break it, you need more than zeal. You need fluency in how the trap is built and where it steals your strength. Next, we will open that machinery, naming the loops, the quiet permissions, and the way out that does not depend on white-knuckling but on design. The most effective ambush are the ones that feel ordinary. This trap does not thunder into your life with fanfare. It hums in the background like an appliance you stopped hearing. It begins in the smallest permission, the glance you excuse, the boredom you dress as break time, the thought you let finish its sentence because it seems harmless. That permission becomes a pattern. The pattern becomes a place your mind starts visiting on schedule, and soon the visit has a gravity that argues like logic. You are not choosing anymore. You are being chosen by your own grooves. Desire has learned the route to your attention, and attention, once captured, is the currency of your life. The cycle then completes itself with a predictable coda relief, then fog. Fog, then guilt. Guilt, then vows. Vows, then the next perfectly reasonable permission. That is how a single compromise becomes a season. If you only fight at the moment of heat, you will spend your strength at the most extreme point of the curve. The trap is engineered to make you meet it there. That is why so many who love God confuse exhaustion with failure. They are simply fighting too late. The machinery lives earlier, upstream, where inputs are curated, rhythms are lax, and the imagination is left unshepherded. Eyes are gates. Ears are gates. Idle minutes are gates. When the gates are porous, your inner world becomes a market where any vendor can rent a stall. You do not need paranoia. You need authorship. Authorship is the quiet decision to decide what enters before it asks, to set the price of your attention high enough that impulse cannot afford it. It looks unremarkable from the outside. A phone that sleeps out of reach. A morning that belongs to silence before it belongs to anyone else. A body that moves daily so it remembers it was made for work and worship, not only reaction. These are not rules that make you rigid. They are rails that let you move quickly without falling off the path. The enemy does not only sell indulgence. He sells story. His favorite script dresses compromise as normal and recovery as impossible. He wants you to confuse common with harmless and stumble with identity. When the voice says, "This is just who you are," answer with evidence. Not a speech, but a change in choreography. Go to bed 10 minutes earlier than the hour where you typically lose the plot. Put your most tempting doorway one step farther than your tired hands can reach. Replace the evening drift with a landing ritual so simple a child could follow it. This is not moral theater. It is nervous system kindness. When your body learns the new dance, your mind stops arguing with it. You are not trying to become a different species. You are becoming more yourself than the loop allowed. There is also a social architecture to the trap. Isolation amplifies the whisper, and performance poisons help. If the only place you tell the truth is alone with your shame, the shame will curate your edits. You do not need a crowd. You need one or two people who love your formation more than your image. The point is not to narrate every urge. It is to shrink the distance between stumble and return. A single honest sentence sent sooner than usual can cut the cycle in half. The aim is not to display weakness. It is to practice rapid repair. Over time, your nervous system learns that falling is not fatal and that getting up quickly is normal. The loop loses its dramatic music and becomes an inconvenience rather than an identity. Discern, 2. The role of fatigue and friction. Most collapses are not born in moments of blazing rebellion. They are born in weeks of small neglect. Sleep was light. Food was noise. Work sprawled into every corner. Prayer became a headline instead of a habitat. In that thin air, your defenses are not sinful. They are simply tired. Bring oxygen back. Feed your attention with words that lift rather than heat. Touch the earth with your hands, cook, sweep, right by hand so your body stops living only in screens and cravings. Let beauty do its sober work. Daylight on your face, music that does not borrow tomorrow's joy, a walk that empties the static. These are not sentimentalities. They are strategic repairs that thicken the atmosphere where temptation used to move easily. You will know the machinery is failing when your choices get earlier and smaller. You notice the glance as it asks for a home and you keep it homeless. You feel the old door handle in your palm and decide to keep walking. You sense the familiar script beginning and decline your line. Victory will not look like fireworks. It will look like Tuesday becoming trustworthy again. The fog thins. Prayer stops feeling like a courtroom and starts feeling like a conversation. You do not grow cold. You become clear. The strange desire that once ruled your hours becomes a signal you can read, a nudge to rest, to create, to call a brother, to step outside, to return to the one whose voice steadies your breathing and reclaims your focus. From here, we move from defense to design. The same current that once scattered you is the current that can carry you if you learn to lead it. In the next topic, we will practice transmutation. How to take the energy of desire and give it work to do, turning chemistry into clarity, impulse into presence, and longing into a power that builds rather than breaks. There is a turning point in every honest battle where you stop asking, "How do I make this feeling disappear?" and start asking, "Where does this power belong?" That question changes everything, because transmutation does not shame energy. It assigns it. The same charge that once scattered your focus can be taught to carry weight. Desire is not only a heat in the body. It is a river that wants a channel, and channels are built, not wished for. When you refuse to build, the river floods whatever is lowest late hours, unguarded screams, thin moments where you were meant to rest. When you build, the river irrigates what you were born to grow. You notice this first in your attention. The mind that used to sprint toward relief learns to walk toward meaning. Your prayers stop sounding like emergency broadcasts and begin to sound like the steady work of a craftsman with sleeves rolled, present to the task and unafraid of silence. You become less theatrical and more exact. You stop bargaining with yourself and start leading yourself, which is what authority has always meant. Transmutation begins in the body because the body is where the current lives. You are not trying to erase sensation. You are translating it. Breath becomes bridge, slow inhales that lengthen the spine, unhurried exhales that tell the nervous system you are safe to choose. Movement becomes message, work that uses your hands, motion that teaches endurance without demanding spectacle, small acts that return you to the ground you stand on, so your chemistry is not the only truth in the room. Hunger, in this light, is not an indictment. It is information. Sometimes it says you need sleep. Sometimes it says you need sunlight. Sometimes it says you need to create something with enough difficulty to spend the energy honestly. When you answer with presence instead of panic, desire stops being the boss and becomes the bell that calls you back to stewardship. Then the imagination, once a theater for flashes, becomes a workshop for blueprints. You begin to give your hours a shape that can actually hold fire. Work acquires a center again. You do not chase a dozen tasks to feel busy. You select the one assignment that requires your whole signal. Conversation grows cleaner. You prefer rooms where truth can breathe to rooms that applaud your mask. Even leisure changes tone. You choose joy that leaves no debt and beauty that steadies rather than hijacks. None of this looks dramatic from the outside, which is why it is so strong. Transmutation loves the ordinary because ordinary is where the leaks were. A phone that sleeps out of reach is not a moral trophy. It is a valve. A morning kept for God before it is given to anyone else is not a superstition. It is a treaty. A closing ritual at day's end is not a performance. It is a landing strip where your mind can return from weather. Relationships either amplify this work or erode it, and transmutation is ruthless in its kindness here. You will find yourself drawn to people who honor your pace, who are not threatened by your boundaries, who care more about your formation than your performance. Their presence does not thrill your nervous system the way a shortcut thrills. It deepens your breath. With them, you are not a brand to be curated, but a soul to be kept. And where you once accepted connections that domesticated your convictions, You now recognize the cost in minutes and momentum. You decline with respect, not contempt, because you are not rejecting people. You are rejecting the gravity that once made you unreliable to your own calling. This is not isolation. It is alignment. True community does not ask you to dim. It helps you steward the brightness so it warms rather than scorches. You will meet resistance, not only from old habits, but from the part of you that fears living without the quick prize of indulgence. Expect the voice that calls this too intense, too much, unsustainable. Answer it with results, not arguments. Show it the steadier mornings and the cleaner work. Show it the prayers that no longer limp and the decisions that no longer leak. Show it the return of humor, the kinder eyes, the way your presence relaxes rooms that used to tense around you. The body understands evidence, and so does the soul. Over time, what once felt like deprivation begins to feel like dignity. You realize you did not make your life smaller. You made it accurate. The deepest sign that transmutation has taken root is the reappearance of sight. You start seeing which desires are invitations to intimacy and which are imitations of it. You sense earlier when a path asks you to pay with attention you cannot spare. You catch the counterfeit before the price tag turns over. And when you do stumble, you recover quickly without writing a new identity from an old mistake. The loop is not broken by one heroic stand, but by 100 early, quiet choices that no one will clap for and that you will never regret. This is the win the enemy cannot counterfeit. A life that is boring to darkness because there is nothing left for it to grab. From here, we will stop treating victory as a moment and start treating it as a culture. Transmutation gives you power. Integration keeps it. In the next part, we will build a living protocol, simple, repeatable practices that protect your clarity, environments that support your pace, and a way of walking that turns private authority into public peace without noise. Power that arrives in a moment is beautiful. Power that remains in a culture is freedom. Integration is where the voltage you reclaimed stops being a rescue mission and becomes the way your hours are built. The measure is simple and quiet. Your mornings borrow their tone from presence rather than panic. Your evenings land gently enough that tomorrow is not already in debt. Your work regains a center. Your relationships feel less like negotiations and more like covenants. Your attention spends most of its time where your soul can breathe. None of this needs an audience. Integration is a conversation between your spirit and your schedule, your values and your calendar, your yes and the architecture that makes that yes possible on an ordinary day. Begin where your day begins. You do not need an epic ritual to be faithful. You need a gate you pass through the same way, at the same time, until your nervous system relaxes into trust. Keep the first voice clean, the first breath unhurried, the first words honest enough to puncture any leftover fog from the night. When the early hour belongs to God, before it belongs to screens, you are not performing piety. You are underwriting peace. That peace will not make you immune to pressure, but it will make you allergic to counterfeit urgency. It becomes easier to tell the difference between a demand that deserves you and a distraction that only wants to rent you. Guard the transitions that used to leak. The minutes before sleep are not a landfill for unprocessed noise. They are a landing strip where your mind returns from weather. Land on gratitude that names the good without pretending the hard is easy. Name one correction for tomorrow in a sentence short enough to remember when you are tired. Go to bed with the dignity of a person who has closed the day rather than collapsed into it. This is not romance. It is repair. Night after night, the body learns you can be counted on, and that reliability is the root of self-respect. When you respect yourself in small ways, you stop selling yourself in large ones. Integration always touches the body because a soul without a body is a theory. Move in ways that teach endurance rather than vanity. Feed yourself without turning meals into anesthesia. Touch the ground with your hands so your life is not lived only in abstractions. Beauty helps more than pride will admit. Daylight on your face, music that does not raid tomorrow's joy, an honest laugh that leaves no aftertaste. These are not decorations. They are oxygen. Desire behaves better in rooms that are well ventilated by joy, and temptation loses half its script when you are not exhausted, undernourished, and alone. Community becomes precise now. You are done with crowds that applaud your mask. You are hungry for tables where truth is normal and pace is respected. Pick people by what your spirit does in their presence. If your center loosens and your standards start negotiating, that is cost, not chemistry. If your breath deepens and your convictions feel safer, that is alignment. You do not need to announce boundaries to the right people. They arrive already honoring them. And when you do fail, which you will because you are human and not a brand, fall forward into the few who love your formation more than your image. Rapid truth told without theater shortens the distance between stumble and return. That shortening is how you stop losing weeks to what used to steal days. Work, too, must be reclaimed from performance. The point is not to be busy. It is to be directed. Choose assignments that require your whole signal and release. The ones that make a lot of noise without building anything you would want to be found near. Let excellence be a form of devotion rather than a way to earn oxygen. When you give yourself to work that actually matters, the energy that once looked for escape finds a home. You discover that fatigue is gentler when it comes from meaning rather than from managing an image. Integration matures your language. You retire sentences that imprison you in absolutes and learn the sentences that put your will back in your hands. You are not a person who always fails. You are a person who returns quickly. You are not broken beyond repair. You are being rebuilt where it matters. You do not owe anyone a spectacle of strength. You owe your calling a rhythm it can trust. Speak to yourself like a leader you would follow, because your body is listening, and it performs what your mouth rehearses. Expect seasons where the old weather returns. Nothing has gone wrong when an old door rattles. It is only a chance to practice earlier, smaller choices with less drama. In those moments, remember what you learned about design over willpower. Make the wrong thing farther away and the right thing nearer. Shorten the distance to prayer and increase the distance to impulse. Put beauty in the path and remove bait from the edges. Small frictions and small helps, repeated, are how cultures are made. A culture is simply what happens without trying. Build one you are glad to live inside, and desire will learn your hours instead of dictating them. You will know integration is real when your life becomes boring to darkness. There is less to grab, less to inflame, less to exploit. Your yes has weight again, and your no does not leak. People around you will not be able to explain why room's steady when you enter. You will know it is because you stopped spending your focus on battles that did not belong to you. Authority, held quietly, begins to travel ahead of your words. That is when the chosen stop being merely inspired and start becoming useful. Hold here a moment. You have learned to read the war, honor the mirrors, dismantle the machinery, and channel the current. All that remains is to seal this into a way of walking that does not depend on hype. In the conclusion, we will gather the threads and set a simple human vow you can keep. To move without noise, to carry what is holy without dropping it, and to let your results say what your lips no longer need to shout. Now you can name what once felt nameless. The strange desire that scattered your focus was never proof that you were broken. It was proof that you were being contended for. You learned to see the trap early, to lead the current instead of denying it, to trade noisy vows for quiet authorship. When desire was left homeless, it flooded the lowest ground. When you gave it a home and purpose, it irrigated everything that matters. Clearer words, Steadier work, relationships that breathe, a presence that calms rooms without asking permission. David warned you about the single unled moment. Samson warned you about the slow leak. You answered both by designing your hours. Earlier choices, smaller frictions, faster returns. Not perfection coherence. Not performance stewardship. And that is why your life is becoming boring to darkness. There is less to inflame, less to grab, less to counterfeit. Your yes has weight again. Your no longer leaks. Do not fear old weather. Doors you closed will rattle on schedule, especially when sleep is thin or pressure is thick. Nothing is wrong when that happens. It is the invitation to practice what you now know. Make the right thing nearer, the wrong thing farther. Land the day with dignity. Tell one honest line sooner than usual and re-enter your rhythm without theater. Guard tenderness as you guard power. Let beauty be oxygen, not anesthesia. Choose tables where truth is normal and pace is respected. Speak less and mean more, so your results get to arrive before your explanations. Above all, keep translating the signal. When pull appears, ask what needs rest, what needs work, what needs prayer, what needs a human voice. Eled, the same current that once brought regret, becomes the bell that calls you back to God and to the work that fits your hands. If this steadied your breath and you want these quiet, clarifying words to meet you when you need them most, take 2 seconds now and subscribe. Not for a number on a screen, but as a small vow to keep this field of clarity open between us. Thank you for walking with me today. Keep your pace clean, your heart steady, and your results loud. Be well, stay aligned, and I'll see you in the next one.